Well, hiya, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. Come to you here on Tag Tuesday. Got a tag for you. I was watching Karen Evans's channel, and she created the Autumnal Book Tag. And so it's basically present 13 books about autumn or fall, whatever you want to call it. But 13 books that either remind you of it or deal with it in one way or another. And so I've got 13 books here to present to you that deal with fall or autumn, if you want that. So here we go. So the first book that reminds me of fall is Tony Danza's I'd Like to Apologize to Every Teacher I Ever Had. My year as a rookie teacher at Northeast High. And so this is kind of an autobiography or a memoir, if you would, of his year in teaching. And it reminds me of fall because obviously school starts up, and of course fall is here in what, a week and a half, and so most of the beginning of our school year is always in the fall. And so when I read this, I think of school getting started, I think of fall, I think of the weather changing from hot to cool and even into cold. And so with those weather changes are also a bunch of changes in the sports scene. So that's going to be the subject of my next book. So we always got what we call the Fall Classic, the World Series. I had a baseball book around here all about World Series teams somewhere. I have no idea where it went. I think I boxed it up upstairs. And so I had to go with plan B on this one. So I went to a guy who was a World Series hero, Willie Mays, The Life, the Legend by James S. Hirsch, authorized by Willie Mays. This was an excellent, excellent biography on Willie Mays. And of course, it definitely goes through his World Series career, his playing in the Fall Classic. And so for me, I coach baseball during the summer, but of course ours is done before fall. But the major leagues are still playing, and I always enjoy watching the Fall Classic. So for me, that's definitely a sign of fall. Second book that I've got here that reminds me of fall, and I might have to explain it. So we go from baseball to football. I couldn't find my football books. So I skipped a sport and I went to basketball because here in Iowa, I coach all three of those sports, and our middle school basketball actually starts in the fall and actually technically is done before winter starts. And so we actually have all of our sports right there in the fall. Now, our high school obviously goes through the winter, but our middle school is done before Christmas at the school that I teach at. And so I picked a basketball book to help remind me of fall. Knight, My Story by Bob Knight with Bob Hamill. And he was always an interesting character, pretty fiery coach, always doing probably a very good coach, but at the same time always doing not so smart things, and got in a lot of trouble throughout his career for his temper and just how he treated some of his players. But it always reminds me of basketball. Don't worry, I don't act like that. My older brother, always liked watching him coach, and I can remember watching him coach in, I don't remember what game it was, but I do remember a chair go flying across the basketball court. And so he was always interesting. But this reminds me of fall. All three of those sports. So we get school started, and then we get baseball ended, football going, and then basketball going. And so that always reminds me of fall. Now, for the next book that I've got, this is a book that belongs to my daughter, and we've been reading it over and over and over. This would be the 3-year-old I'm talking about. And it is Winnie the Pooh, A Gift for Pooh. And I always like Winnie the Pooh books. A lot of them take place in the fall. You see the wind kick up, and then you see the leaves blowing around. And there was one, and just overall, the color schemes in the book always have a fall a hint of fall to them. And there's one scene in here. See, here's another one. It's got nice fall colors. So it always reminds me of fall. Let me find the one. Yeah, right here. It's a picture. They're going through and they're giving gifts to each other. And this was when they gave Rue a, what did they call it? I can't remember. You lift the flap to find out. A stick for playing Pooh sticks. Okay, and then they take the stick, throw it on one side of the bridge down in the creek, and it goes under the bridge to the other. And anyway, if you look at that picture, you see all the leaves blowing around on the bridge, and then throughout the rest of the book, as they're walking, there's leaves on the ground. And so anyway, I always like Winnie the Pooh. My daughter likes to read about Winnie the Pooh, and it always has a fall look to it. And so that's my little kid book for the month, or for the fall season. All right, so since we're getting ready to roll into, we'll be in October before you know it. Halloween will be here before you know it. So we had to go with a couple scary stories. And so start off with a classic. And this is going to be a three for one item. So I'm counting this as 3 books because it's 3 in 1. This is a Signet classic. And, you can't have Halloween without Frankenstein and Dracula. And then you throw in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with it, and you've got a complete Halloween. You always see Frankenstein and Dracula, kids dressed up like them. Doesn't matter how old those stories get, they still are classics. They're still around. And so those were some of my picks for the Halloween season. Now, just for October overall, because, you think of October as being kind of a scary month, I guess. I mean, the weather starts cooling down and the leaves are falling and you start getting cold rain, and that's just kind of dreary. So I went with a book that I recently won in a drawing, and I've been saving it for the month of October. It's Stephen King's The Bazaar, or Stories, let's see, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. And so there's that book. I can't tell you much about it because I have not read it yet. This is my one of my October reads. It's a series of stories. And Stephen King always reminds me of the fall season because he writes kind of scary stuff. Now, what would a history teacher be without bringing up some history titles that deal with fall? So I'm going to start off with Columbus, The Four Voyages, 1492 to 1504 by Lawrence Bergreen. Of course, Columbus Day, October 12th, day before my birthday. And so I can never forget that one for some reason. And so this is definitely in the fall. Definitely game changer for history. Recently, I've been talking about, in some of my videos, talking about this book, The Mayflower by Nathaniel Philbrick. And if you remember, the Mayflower landed in mid-November. I think November 16th. Hopefully I'm right on the date, but it was mid to late November. And yeah, it was kind of late in the season to be landing a ship and having to build all your stuff. But anyway, that's definitely a fall book. Plus, I always cover that in the fall with my kids. That's what I'm doing right now. Let's go with this next one, 100 Days, the Campaign That Ended World War I by Nick Lloyd. Now, some of this takes place in the summer, but the late September, October, and into early November, the campaign that ended the war, for the United States coming into World War I. And so this book would definitely, a lot of it would deal with the fall season. Now, just in addition to this, I have a history of my grandfather's group that he was in World War I. And he was gassed in the Argonne Forest in late October. And so a lot of that book, it deals with the spring and summer, but it also, it ends in the fall. And it gives lists of these guys that were involved in these campaigns, or this campaign. And anyway, it would definitely be a fall choice also if we're talking history. All right. My next history selection is one that I've read recently, Reelecting Lincoln, the battle for the 1864 presidency. So, obviously, presidential elections, they're in November. And so, once you get into September, October, and into that first week of November, you guys know that we're going to start seeing TV commercials all over the place for the presidential elections. And so, this was no different, except for no TV, but there was all kinds of stuff going on in the media of the time period, the newspapers and such, and definitely about the fall season. And last but not least, in my choices of books about fall. Now, this one's going to seem kind of odd because it stretches over the summer, fall, winter, and into the spring, actually. But Desperate Passage, The Donner Party's Perilous Journey West by Ethan Rarick. And this was an awesome book about the Donner Party. And it talks a lot about how they left way too late in the year. They were very late spring and into early summer before they really got going on their trip west. And then, by time they get to the Sierra Nevadas, and they try to cross them, it's late fall and it's already starting to snow, and they're in the fall and they get stuck there over the winter. But a lot of this story is going to take place in the fall, and it's going to look at those mistakes they made, and quite the interesting story. I recommend that book if you've never read that. So anyway, this is my autumnal book tag. Thanks to Karen Evans for creating this. It's kind of fun looking through the books, trying to find autumn books or fall books. So I gave you a little bit, gave you one about school, about all the sports seasons that change around, and then I gave you one of my daughters, and then some history topics. I hope you enjoyed my selection. These were just some of them that remind me of fall. I had some other ones I thought about, Little House on the Prairie, Little House in the Big Woods, when they start talking about going into fall, and then when it starts getting cold there in Wisconsin. And there was some cool scenes in that book, but I could only choose 13, so it didn't make the list. But anyway, thank you for watching BookTube. I hope you've enjoyed this. Go out and do the Autumnal Book Tag. Maybe figure out how to say it a little bit better than me. But anyway, until next time, BookTube, happy reading.